we are ready to start. As I said before, hello everyone, welcome to this lecture in which we will continue the topic we covered last week, the Dante's circles. Today, however, we'll continue explaining the last four circles, circles 6, 7, 8, and 9. Remember that if you have any questions, you can leave them in the comments section down below, and at the end we're going to be answering that questions, or we are going to be in case you are not watching the conference live, we're going to be answering that questions in the comments. Well, okay, before we begin, let's review a little bit what we saw in the last conference, or the first part of this topic. There we studied 5 of the 9 Dantesque circles, and we discovered that this knowledge was left to us by Dante Alighieri, who descended into the submerged spheres on planet Earth in the company of his guru and his divine mother. There he was able to witness what souls had to go through in this process of involution as they descended through these spheres. Therefore, the book Dante left us is written in an astral language, and everything is a representation of what the souls or sparks must go through there in that place. Let us remember that in each cycle of manifestation, we will be given 108 existences with a human physical body to complete this work of revolution and achieve the self-realization of our being. This entails working with the 3 factors for the revolution of consciousness. One of these 3 factors is psychological death, which allows us to voluntarily eliminate all the psychological defects we have created throughout our existences and in the evolutionary process of the wheel of samsara. However, if a person doesn't complete this work of elimination of the defects after the 108 existences, they begin the process of involution, where they must enter these Dantesque spheres, and these defects must be involuntarily eliminated according to their own law. This means they will have to repeat what they loved doing so much in life until they are sick of it, and until the defect explodes from the pain of so much repetition. However, since the elimination process isn't being done voluntarily, all the wisdom of that cycle will be lost. The soul will be lost. This is what many people know or call as hell. Let us also remember that this is a cleansing process. However, it is not eternal, as many believe, since at the end of the process the spark comes out completely clean of the defects and ready to begin another turn on the wheel of samsara, starting from the mineral kingdom. It's important, also very important, to remember that in phase A, lecture 9, we talked about our own infradimensions and the work we need to do voluntarily in those infradimensions to free ourselves from this involuntary process in the infradimensions of planet Earth. Last week, we were studying the spheres of the Moon, Mercury, Venus, the Sun, and Mars. We learned that in the sphere of the Moon, the defects of laziness are to be eliminated. In the sphere of Mercury, the defects of fornication. In the sphere of the Sun, the defects of imbalance. And in the sphere of Mars, the defects of violence. These spheres are closely related to the instinct. However, the spheres we will study today are related to the intellect. When these selves or defects manifest, they use the intellect to calculate their actions, and therefore, to a certain extent, they act with greater coolness and awareness of the evil they are doing. Let us also remember that each sphere has a certain number of laws that double as one is descending through these spheres, increasing materiality, conditioning, and suffering. Well, we will continue today with the sixth Dantesque circle, the submerged sphere of Jupiter. This circle, as you can see here, it is subjected to 3072 laws. Time here becomes frighteningly slow. In this region, every minute seems like centuries, and therefore life becomes tedious and unbearable. It is the abode of atheists, materialists, enemies of the eternal, blasphemers also live in that region, those who hate anything that might have a smack of divinity. Here, the atheists, buried in the tomb of their own passions, hatreds, and limitations, are found. When we think of the great legislators, sovereigns, and lords who govern social conglomerates, we obviously discover tyrants and petty tyrants who cause complications and pain here and there, hierarchs who abused their power, those terrible fathers who, having plenty of property, deny their children food, shelter, and refuge, that believed themselves to be virtuous, just, and kind, and some of them were even deeply religious. We also find here heads of families who aspired to the intimate self-realization of their being despite all their cruelties. Also, very honorable and sincere heads of families, but terribly mistaken. Some of these gentlemen, were extraordinarily fanatical in the world where they lived, and with sticks and whips they taught religion to their children, as if this could be learned with weapon. Those who also wanted to tyrannize their wife or husband, their friends, their employees. So we need to eliminate this tyrant defect from ourselves because we all have it, okay? Jupiter is generous, giving, and altruistic. So what would be the antithesis of generosity? Well, selfishness, usury. There are those who hoard of the earth's goods for themselves. All of them, we're going to be finding them in this sphere. Or if we don't work on ourselves, we are going to be having to go through this sphere because we all, as I said before, have these psychological defects. Well, in the seventh Dantesque circle, which is the submerged sphere of Saturn, the souls are subjected to 6,144 laws, as you can see here. There, everywhere, violence reigns within the bloody submerged spheres. Unnecessary destruction is seen, horrific blows against things, against people, against everything. The Saturnian influence with its centrifugal forces disintegrates everything, reducing people, furniture, doors, etc. to cosmic dust. This is symbolizing the violence we're going to find in this sphere. The seventh Dantesque circle is therefore the abode of those who are violent against nature, of those who are violent against art, of the fraudulent, of those who are violent against God, of those who are violent against themselves, against their own possessions, or against the possessions of others. Violence against nature exists when we violate the sexual organs. Such a crime exists when a man forces, for for example, his wife to perform sexual intercourse when she's not in a position to do so, or vice versa. When a man forces himself to perform sexual intercourse when his organism is not in a suitable condition for it, and vice versa. Such a crime exists in those who commit the crime of rape, when the phallus is forced to become erect when it is not in a favorable condition for intercourse, when under the pretext of practicing sexual magic or even with the best intentions of self-realization, a man forces himself to perform chemical intercourse or forces his wife to do so. It exists in masturbators, in those who perform intercourse while the woman is menstruating, when spouses perform sexual union while the woman is pregnant, when sexual magic is practiced twice in a day, violating the laws of the creative magnetic pause. Also, there is violence against nature in those who abstain radically and absolutely from sexual practice, and with this I mean a state of celibacy, in homosexuals and lesbians because they are seeds that do not germinate anymore, women who take abortives and murder their newborn children, in pedophiles, those who violently reject sex, like those who abuse it, fornicators, people who are very well defined in the Don Juan, Tenorio, or Casanova type, and even the devil type, who are those who use this knowledge to pervert and have sex with those they are meant to instruct. When we force also the lower creatures of nature to engage in artificial copulations, violating their free will, when we adulterate vegetables and fruits with the famous grafts, when we damage the ecosystem by polluting the water, the air, the earth, and the elementals. Also, when we castrate ourselves or when we castrate animals. Okay? Well, violence against God. Here we find the arrogance and pride of those who are violent against the divine. Is in the submerged seventh sphere the worst torture. Violence against divinity exists when we do not obey superior orders, when we attempt against our own lives, when we blaspheme angrily, in those who want nothing to do with mystical spiritual matters, in those who suppose they can exist without divine mercy, and who deep down rebel against anything that smells of divinity. Also, we're going to find violence against God in those self-sufficient individuals who laugh and are ascetics when they hear matters that have to do with the spiritual aspects of life. In the scoundrels of the intellect, also in those know-it-alls who deny all spiritual possibilities to the man, in those who believe they have monopolized universal knowledge, in the enlightened ignoramuses who not only ignore but also ignore that they ignore, in the pseudo-sapient ones who have deprived humanity of spiritual values. Remember, I said before, that here in this sphere we're going to find also fraud. Fraud exists in those who form, for example, an esoteric circle and then abandon it, or confound it with their crimes, either by seducing another woman or by seducing her with the intention of practicing sexual magic, by secretly committing adultery, by exploiting their brothers, by promising things they cannot fulfill, by preaching things they do not practice, by doing the opposite of what they teach, by causing scandal, by, for example, drinking alcohol, setting a bad example for the others. Fraud also exists in the man who promises marriage to a woman and then breaks his word, in the woman who gives her word to a man and then defrauds him by falling in love with another man, for example, in the father who promises his son this or that gift, this or that help, and then breaks his promise, in the individual who borrows and doesn't pay it back, in lottery, in gambling sellers, because the victims convinced they can win, lose their money and feel cheated. All that violence is wasted in this circle. And as I said before, we have to look for all these defects in our interior. That's why we have to start going down to our own infradimensions to find all these defects and eliminate them from our own psychology. Okay? Well, the eighth Dantesque circle is the submerged sphere of Uranus. This circle is subjected to 12,288 laws. In this circle dwell all liars and falsifiers, and all those who violate the truth. False alchemists, black tantrics, metal falsifiers or money falsifiers, and those who have crystallized negatively. We also find counterfeiters, forgers, impersonators, false prophets, incestuous people, sowers of discord, those who promise but do not keep their promises, those who cause scandals, people who are false, liars, hypocrites, etc. Dante mentioned that in this circle there are 10 caves, and each one for a different type of liar who had to endure a certain type of punishment. All those who have awakened to evil, black magicians, even knowing that they must devolve within the bowels of the world, do not repent of the path they have chosen, because they have made their devolution, this process of involution, and the fatal wheel of samsara, a religion or a mysticism. They are going to be devoured by the horrible serpent Pythian, which is the negative aspect of the Divine Mother. Okay, this with the purpose of destroying them, and the defect, this black magician defect. Here, this defect is going to be disintegrated and is going to be reduced to cosmic dust in order to liberate the essence from this terrible defect. The ego must always be dissolved, no matter what the cost, whether we like it or not, okay? Voluntarily or involuntarily. The serpent must inevitably swallow, either victorious or unsuccessful, okay? This serpent, which is the mother, which have like a positive aspect and a negative aspect. In the negative aspect, in this process of involution, is going to swallow us, okay, and is going to eliminate in that step in this process this terrible defect of black magic, okay. But if we voluntarily do this work, there will come a time when we will be also swallowed by the serpent in its positive aspects, and we will become the serpent, or rather Mother God. We explain this in the lecture of the third mountain and the lecture entitled The Symbol of the Eagle Swallowing the Serpent. We're going to be studying that conference in an upcoming conference. Okay, so now let's study the ninth Dantesque circle, the submerged sphere of Neptune. This circle is subjected to 24,576 laws. Imagine the level of materiality and suffering, okay, is lived in this sphere. In this submerged zone, traitors are reduced to ashes. In this circle, the involuting creatures are finally disintegrated. There are many types of betrayal, but some are so serious that they are actually punishable by death. In this case, the traitor immediately dies and his body is left in the hands of a demon. The cosmic executors carry out the sentence, and such unfortunates immediately disincarnate, passing into the involutionary process, although their physical bodies do not die, since it is known that any demon replacing the traitor remains within his body, so that the karmic processes of those people or relatives who in one way or another are related to such perverse personalities are not altered. Although it may seem incredible, many living dead currently roam the streets of cities, whose true owners now live in the underworld, going through this process of involution. Thus, the judges of heavenly justice condemned the traitors with the death penalty. This is the last sphere and also the coldest, due to the coldness and calculation that is used to betray someone who previously we had given our word, or someone who trusts us and we have ended up doing them wrong and betraying them. Let us also remember that all our selves or defects or egos are treacherous, as they constantly lead us to betray our inner Christ. Every time we satisfy a desire, we are surrendering our fire to the defect, and that is a betrayal. Let us remember that betrayal is composed of desire, the justification of that desire, and then comes the act of ill will, which is taking action to satisfy that desire. Descending to the ninth sphere is indispensable. Some do so in life, spontaneously, of their own free will and for their intimate self-realization, as we taught in Conference 9 of Phase A, while others, the majority, the multitudes, do so unconsciously when they descend into the abyss of perdition in this process of devolution. After the last breath is exhaled in that region, the essence, the psychic material that which we have a soul, is freed without ego, since, as we have already said, the latter is reduced to cosmic dust. Once the essence is emancipated, it assumes a beautiful childlike figure filled with radiant beauty. This is the moment in which the devas of nature examined the liberated essence, and after having verified that essence to the point of satiety, that it no longer possesses any subjective infrahuman element, they granted a ticket of freedom. By this I mean that they grant the soul the joy of liberation. Once the creature is free from the epidermis of this world, of those infradimensions, it begins a new evolution process. Then he becomes a gnome or a pygmy of the mineral kingdom, and he will later continue his evolution ascending through the plant and animal kingdoms until one day he reconquers the state of intellectual humanoid, a state in which he can achieve the revolution of consciousness and the intimate self-realization of his being. As you can see, this conference does not seek to generate fear by describing the process that is experienced in these infradimensions, but rather to generate in us a motivation to revolutionize ourselves and no longer waste any more time to start working on ourselves to successfully complete the objective that we came to achieve in this manifestation, and to transcend those laws of return and recurrence, as well as many others that have us subjected in this great machine. It is even very advisable for us to investigate in the astral world how many times we have gone through this process of involution, and we will discover how many souls we have lost by not working on ourselves, and that we finally focus and put the seriousness that inner work requires. Let us remember that when we come to this manifestation, we will be given 3,000 cycles or 3,000 turns of that wheel called samsara, and in each cycle we will have 108 human physical bodies. That gives us a total of 324,000 existences with a human physical body, 324,000 opportunities for self-realization. However, there are some sparks who exhaust all those opportunities and fail, and others give up on the wheel, also failing. It takes revolution and true spiritual journey to emerge victorious from this wheel and achieve the mastery we came here to attain. Okay? And well, this was today's conference. Thank you very much for joining us today. And we'd like to extend an invitation to the next conference, where we'll be discussing Theosophy, Spiritism, and Medium. We will discover what these schools are based on, why they don't help us advance in our inner work, and why we shouldn't mix them with this knowledge. So, thank you very much, and see you next time.